Hello, I'm Reverend Rick, and it is my honor to be with you today. We really hope that this video is a blessing to you. And if it is, please consider making a donation. People watch our videos locally when they cannot necessarily come to church throughout the United States and the world. So please join us and click the link below and make a donation. Thank you, and let this be a blessing to you.
Well, let us prepare ourselves. If you put your hand over your eyes, I open my eyes to see the spiritual truth today. Now over your ears, I open my ears to hear the spiritual truth today. Now cross over your heart and extend out your arms. I open my heart to receive the spiritual truth today. The spiritual truth that I'm working with today is that you are God. You are God. See, the teaching of science of mind is not that it is God and us, but it is God as us. It is not God and you, but it's God as you. It is not God and me, but it's God as me. Now, I'm going to tell you something, and I always want to be honest with you. Every time I say that, I get a little nervous. I sort of see Sister Mary Margaret out of the corner of my eye with her 2x4 that have inch marks on it. But here's the thing. Even though I know intellectually that there is no God controlling in the sky, that I can either please or displease, even though I know in my mind that I can't control anybody else but me, I am the God of me and my life. You are the God of you and your life, not anybody else's life on this planet. Even though I know all that in my head, I still get nervous. And here's a tip. When I'm nervous about saying that I am God, and I hope nobody else knows that that's what I think, because they're going to think that I'm an egomaniac or worse, I realize that what's happened is I've just identified with a controlling God, a God that is some timing. When I identify with a God that is love, I want to be all that. When I identify with a God that is compassion, I want to be all that. When I identify with a God that is abundance, I want to be all that in my life. See, whenever I'm struggling in my life and I don't have enough money to pay the bills I need, or my relationships aren't as perfect as I wish they would be, or my career is not going in the way that I want it to be, then I get what I'm doing is I forgot to live from the divine me. I'm living from all the stuff that I've gathered around me, but not from the divine me. That me that knows that I can part a sea of victimhood and march right through it if I want. So yesterday we concluded a holiday, and I'm going to just stop here and tell you I'm learning a new way of looking at notes. So y'all are going to just pray for me, aren't you? Practitioners in the room? Practice in the room. You're now in high watch, okay? All right. That sounds good to me. Yesterday we concluded a holiday called Passover on the Jewish calendar, a very powerful holiday. And it's not going anywhere now, Rick. Go to sleep. All right. Oh, there it is. I was going the wrong way. My life. Yesterday the holiday finished, but the wisdoms of a holiday are still with us, and they'll be with us for the end of time, allowing us to have some really great breakthroughs in our life if we can embrace this story called Passover. Now, usually when I tell the story of Passover, that's what I do. I tell it much like I did the Easter story last week, and I kind of weave some wisdoms, because just the story alone has so much spiritual nourishment for us. But today I'm going to tell the story quickly for those of you who might not have heard it. And then I'm going to look at 5 gifts of Passover that if we begin to embrace them, we can really begin to change our entire life. The story begins and for those of you who are biblical, it is the story out of the book of Exodus from the Torah, sometimes called the Old Testament. And it starts in the land of Egypt under the rule of a Pharaoh. Now the word Pharaoh simply means king. Pharaoh and king are synonyms. And so this Pharaoh was kind of new to his job. And he looked at the Jewish community and he said, you know what? They're growing a little too fast. This is making me too uncomfortable. If they get too influential, they may begin to influence our culture. They may begin to influence our way of living. So I'm going to try and diminish them in this land of Egypt. Now, honestly, that should sound very familiar to those of us in this country. There is a section of the citizenry and some of the leadership who are extremely worried about the browning of the United States. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with that term, the browning of the United States, in 2040, there will be more people of color in the United States than there are white people. And that makes some people very uncomfortable. If you don't understand oneness, that can make those people who are white and are now in power really kind of nervous. And so the Pharaoh and person of interest number one in this country sought ways to diminish the impact of minority people on their community. And so in our country, what we do is we put babies in cages, or we just say to the border, you're closed, I'm not letting any more people in. That's our way of doing it. The Pharaoh's way of doing it was even a little worse. He decided that he would kill all the Jewish male babies as a way of stopping the growth of the Jewish community. It didn't work. It doesn't work at all anyway. But the story goes on like this. There was a woman who had, after the edict, I'm going to kill all the Jewish babies. After the edict, there was a woman who had a little baby boy. We know the boy now as Moses. And when Moses was 3 months old, he couldn't be hid anymore. And the mom got worried, and she did the most difficult thing a mother could ever do. And that is, she knew that she had to relinquish this baby if he had any chance at all of living, no matter how small that chance was. And so she built a little boat out of papyrus leaves, and she puts the baby in the boat, and she puts him in the Nile River. And the baby goes down the river, and lo and behold, the daughter of the Pharaoh, who had the edict, the daughter of the Pharaoh sees this little papyrus boat in the Nile. She's sunbathing along the Nile, and she sees the little papyrus boat. And she says, this is my favorite part of the story, she sends her handmaiden out into the Nile. She says, look, swim out there and get me, I know there are crocodiles, I know there are snakes in there, but come on, go out there and get the baby. So she does, and she brings the little boat back and finds out that there's a baby in it, and she falls in love with the baby. Now I promised myself I wouldn't stop the story, but I'm going to hear for a minute. She falls in love with the baby and takes him home to the palace where he lives as an adopted son and grandson of the Pharaoh. What does that teach us? When we get to know one another, when we get to know one another on an individual level, it is much easier for us to fall in love with each other, to stop making these ridiculous proclamations and edicts on the planet. Well, the baby grows up, and like all of us, sometimes he knew he was Jewish, Pharaoh knew he was Jewish, but they loved him anyway. The mother, the adopted daughter knows he's Jewish. But all of us want to be with our people sometimes. You know how that is? He wanted to go and be with the Jewish people. He wanted to, just like some women want to be with women sometimes, people of color want to be with people of color sometimes, gay people want to be with gay people sometimes, trans people want to just be with trans people sometimes. Just because we get our culture, we get our jokes better, we get the language better. We don't have to fool with trying to explain anything better. So that's what he did. He went down to what was the Starbucks of the time in the land of Egypt. He would have coffee with his homies every once in a while. Well, one of those times he goes in, and one of the Israelites is having a fist fight with an Egyptian soldier. And Moses steps in. It's the second time he's done this. He steps in and he kills the Egyptian soldier. Now he understands that he's got to leave, because no matter how much he's loved, he's a Jew, and Jews don't kill Egyptian soldiers. So he runs away, and he kind of just wanders around for a while, and one day he comes upon a water hole that people are getting water for their sheep. And so there are some young girls there trying to get water for their sheep, and the bullies in the land won't let them near the water. And so Moses, being a little codependent, steps in and begins to make sure that the girls can get the water. Well, they do. They get water for their sheep, and they're so happy and so grateful. They say, "Come to dinner at our house tonight. My father would want to thank you very much." And so he goes to dinner at their house, and the father is really happy, and he lines up his 7 daughters, and he says, "Take one." Now, I usually say at this part of the story, we've come a long way. But the truth, on many parts of the world, that still exists. Take one. I want to have one. Well, Moses does take one. He marries her. He becomes a shepherd in this man's flock, and he is a good shepherd, and he's not unhappy as a shepherd. He thinks, this is a good enough life. Why don't I just have this life? But here's the thing. When we're not doing what we're destined to do, what we're not doing what God favored in us to pull off for humanity, we'll get some sort of a notice from God. His notice, you know, is the burning bush. This bush flares up with Moses. And God says something to Moses that I try and carry with me all of the time. And that is this. Take off your sandals. You are on sacred ground. Take off your sandals. You are on sacred ground. You know, for me it means take off my defenses. Take off my judgment. I'm on holy ground, not solid ground, holy ground. Take off my ability to procrastinate. I'm on holy ground. Take off that superiority that you think you have around any other person. You are on holy ground. Well, Moses gets the message that he's going to have to do something, and God says to him, I've got a great job for you. It's your destiny. I want you to go back to the Pharaoh where you grew up, and I want you to tell him, let my people go. No more slaves. These slaves were working sun up to sundown, breaking up rock, carrying rock, being away from their kids. Terrible situation. And so he says, I want you to go tell him to let my people go. And the Pharaoh's not going to jump up and down when you're telling him. He's not going to be happy, but I've got your back. At every step of the way, I've got your back. In fact, he's going to tell you no a bunch of times, and then he's going to tell you, maybe, don't believe him. Each time, I have your back. Now, we know that having the back is the plagues. And I don't have time to go into the plagues today, but the plagues were something that got worse and worse and worse. With every no and every maybe, the plagues got worse. Until the last time Moses said, the Pharaoh said maybe, God said to the Jews, look, put down whatever you're doing right now and get out. Leave. Don't even let the bread rise. I want you to just put everything down and go. And so they did, and they followed Moses. And when they followed Moses, they came to a sea. We know that as the Red Sea. And at the Red Sea, when the Jews got there, they thought, oh man, no, not this. I don't swim very well. I don't have to swim because God parted the sea. And the Jews went to freedom. Now that's a very dramatic tale indeed. Recently, I read an article by a Rabbi Benjamin Belchi. And in it, he said there are 5 powerful gifts of Passover. And so that's what I want to talk about today, are those 5 powerful gifts that I got from that essay. He started his article with this. Scholars have long wondered why Jews who number less than 1/4 of 1% of the world, as Milton memorably put it, the total population of the Jewish people is less than a statistical error in the annual birth rate of the Chinese people, still, we have had such a profound influence on almost every field of human endeavor. What accounts for the remarkable fact in the 20th century, Jews, more than any other minority, have been recipients of the Nobel Prize, with almost 1/5 of all Nobel laureates being Jewish. Perhaps it all goes back to the very beginning of the birth of our people and the Passover holiday that we will shortly be celebrating. Passover, the rabbi says, conveys 5 messages that are now imprinted on the Jewish memory, on the Jewish soul. And because of that, it's become a mantra for them on how to lead and how to become successful, productive, contributing people. The Catholic writer Thomas Cahill says that one of the major gifts of Passover, and this is the first of the 5, the major gift of Passover is memory, remembering. In the Bible it says, remember you were in a strange land in Egypt. Remember the Lord took you out of slavery and bondage. History, remembering, is the only way we learn from our past. You can make a mistake once and you're human. Continuing to make that same mistake, I do it all the time, continuing to make that same mistake over and over and over again. Haven't you done that? Why am I attracting this situation into my life? Why am I attracting these people into my life? Why am I attracting this fear into my life? And it happens, or you think you've solved it, you've gone to a practitioner, you've gone to a therapist, you've prayed, your knees are worn out from praying about this issue so many times. It's because we haven't remembered. We didn't learn from our past. We want to remember the words of the great philosopher George Santana, who said, if we don't learn, we're condemned to repeat our past. Those who don't learn from their mistakes are condemned to repeat from their past. If you're Jewish, you know this. If you have friends who are Jewish, you know this. They have a dinner called a Seder at the time of Passover. It's the longest dinner in the history of humanity. It goes on forever because they tell this story. And why do they do it? They want their children to remember what happened and how they got out. They want their children to learn that. See, memory links us to our past and to our future. And it is the destiny. Our history can be our destiny if we're not awake to it, if we're not aware to it. You know, one of the most horrible diseases on the planet is Alzheimer's disease. Why is it so horrible? Because we lose our memory. We lose our memory. We lose our opportunity for our next destiny. I think it's strange that we don't have a similar word to describe our ignorance of our collective past on the planet. And if we did, maybe we would learn from our collective past. The truth is, amen is right. The truth is, when I was a child in school, slavery was mentioned, but I didn't really understand the cause. I didn't understand the practices. I didn't understand what PTSD, post-traumatic slave syndrome, means today to people. None of that was told to me. So I can't learn from that, and that's why we're repeating so many things here today. You know, when I was a child, I knew about internment camps of Japanese people, but I didn't know much about it. I wasn't taught it. I didn't learn that history so that I could be a part of not happening again. And what do we see in the borders? We see internment camps at the borders. Why? We didn't learn it. I didn't know which Japanese people got into those camps, how they got there, what happened when they got there, how they were treated, or what the impact has on the Japanese American psyche today. And when I was a child, I never even heard about Stonewall. It wasn't even mentioned in school. So we can't learn from those past. So the first one is memory. That's the first gift. Don't close the door on what happened to you. We don't have to live there, but we have to learn from it. The second one is the importance of optimism. The importance of optimism. See, we think that Moses' toughest job was to get the people out of Egypt, but the toughest job was to get Egypt out of the people, because they had become habituated to slavery, and they began feeling like it was just the way it is. You and I do that too. We become habituated to poverty. We become habituated to our teens talking to us in a way that is not healthy. We become habituated to feelings of failure in certain areas of our life. Until we can break that, we can't get this gift. See, when we get that habituated, we forget. We forget that with God, there is no challenge that's insurmountable to us. A tyrant like the Pharaoh can be overthrown. A country as strong as Egypt can be defeated in our life, and slaves can go free. Those babies in those cages can be freed. We have to dream the impossible dream. You and I not only have to dream the impossible dream, but like Alika's song said, we have to start talking about the impossible dream. We have to start acting as if that impossible dream is here now, is right where we are. According to Benjamin Franklin, the story of Passover is what George Washington and his founding fathers rebelled on and relied on as scripture for the oppression, to resist the oppression of the British. In fact, there is a phrase that they used: rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God. Rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God in our life. We have to have a rebellion to the tyrants that we've created and that we've allowed to visit our experience. Because rebellion to tyrants is obedience to the God that we are, to the God of who we are. Martin Luther King Jr. often spoke from Exodus in his march to move civil rights into its next step. It is the most often retold story in Auschwitz. Why? Because it was optimistic. It gave people hope in our life. So the first one is memory. The second one is optimism. The third one is the importance of faith. The importance of faith. And it's very close to optimism and pessimism. See, a pessimist is someone who doesn't feel they have an invisible support in their life. The optimist understands that only through faith, and I'm not talking about organized religion. It can be any faith. It can be faith in the sun coming up in the morning. But the optimist understands that God is always with us. Always with us. And in this church, we translate that to mean this: the God in you is always with me. And the God with me is always with you. So on those days when we need support, when we need help, we turn to the God within each other. See, people of faith, they actually believe that there is, there's no weapon formed against them. People of faith actually believe that they can walk into a room and know that they are loved every single time. All right, I'm going to move this. I am. The fourth one is the importance of family. The importance of family. See, Passover teaches us this. It says, look, you want to make a world that works for everyone on the planet? Start with your own family. Because if we don't start with our own family and we try and run around and do everybody else, we haven't had the practice that we need. Because here's what's true. To have a family of choice and a family of origin, and know the importance of that family, and act from that importance, We have to get comfortable with forgiveness in our lives. See, it will only work if we get comfortable with forgiveness. And that's another topic, but I want to say that the part of the Passover story is understanding what forgiveness means in our life. It also means this: as adults, we need to start healing ourselves. We need to start healing our tendency toward fear, toward depression, toward rage, toward insecurity of any type. We need to start, because it is impossible for a child to grow up and for 18 years, day in, day out, and see parents who are there to protect them and to love them, just be in total rage and total upset all of the time. So begin with your family of origin. You know, as Shannon said earlier this morning, we are sending kids to camp. Do you know what happens when they get into camp? They get put in family groups. And when they get in family groups, they know that they can support each other. And that's important in our life. So the last gift is the importance of responsibility to other people. Realizing that's the Passover story. The importance of helping other people. You know, somebody in this article said, well, you know, if God loved us so much, why did God make us slaves in the first place? And that's a good question. The answer is also found in the Torah. And that is this: we are slaves so that we could have empathy. If we could have empathy for the downtrodden of every generation in our lives. So you and I don't have to experience slavery, although we all have in our own ways by our own doing. But we don't have to experience slavery of somebody else because of the color of our skin or our nationality restricting us. We don't have to have that to have empathy. So you remember, sympathy is a feeling of compassion. It's a feeling of sorrow. It's a feeling of pity for the hardships that other people, another person goes through. Empathy is putting yourself in their shoes, the shoes of another person. See, empathy is a value that we hold strong here at CSA. We're not a church that strives for tolerance. We are not a church that strives for acceptance. We are a church that strives for celebration of everybody. At the Seder dinner that I was telling you about a few minutes ago, there's always an empty chair and an empty placemat. And that's for Elijah. Elijah represents to us all of the people who feel they are other. All the people who feel they are out there. We always have a chair for Elijah. In fact, we have rows and rows for Elijah. If someday, and I hope it's more than just Easter, that we have to bring in extra chairs here, we'll always bring in a chair for Elijah, because that's who we are. And when we understand these 5 gifts, that's when we can understand that it is not God and us, but it is God as us. Let's take this into prayer. Knowing that there is a powerful, powerful energy that surrounds all of us all the time. And so we don't have to make a long prayer. We simply say, thank you for this energy that is me now. I simply release anything unlike it. I release anything unlike the divine in me into the nothingness from which it came. I do it with love. Goodbye, judgment. I love you. Goodbye. No more need here. Goodbye, anything that's negative. Just goodbye. I release this word into the law, and together we say,